using cannabis for medicinal purposes became legal in Minnesota in 2014. Now, the DFL is pushing for the legalization of recreational marijuana with a statewide tour to promote the law change. Joining me to talk more about the effort is Senator Jeff Hayden. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Your colleague, Senator Melissa Franzen, authored the bill to legalize cannabis last session, but it was voted down by Republicans in committee. At that time, you authored a bill that pushed for a task force to study the issue of legalization. But now you're moving ahead with full-blown legalization. Why?
Well, I think what we saw when we talked to people around Minnesota, we saw it at the state fair this year, and there's been other conversations, that people are really want this to happen. That the medicinal or medical cannabis program that we have has limited access and cost a lot of money. So there's actually some work that we probably should be doing on that. But there are so many people who get caught in the process of wanting to be able to use cannabis legally. Some of it, a lot of it is for, healthcare issues, and others that we think it helps. And then just in general, people want to use it, and we think that the best way to do it is to get it from the underground or illicit economy and to regulate it, tax it, and make it in the regular sphere of things in which we do when we want to have fun.
In your experience, then, are the people who are advocating for its legalization using it differently than the way we might remember from the 70s with the comedies and the movies with the smoky rooms and the people acting silly? You're saying people are using marijuana differently than then?
Yeah, we like to say this isn't your grandma's cannabis, if you will, that there are many different ways and people can use it in other states. Obviously, there are edibles. There are different ways that you can ingest it that we believe are safe. Just recently, we're seeing a scare of people that are vaping cannabis, but that's coming from bootleg or on the illicit side of things. We haven't found that same problem when people were getting it legal from legal cannabis from states that actually regulate it. So we think that there's a great opportunity for that to happen in Minnesota, and we not to hear these tragedies of people getting stuff that they don't know where it's from on the illicit market and actually are able to use it effectively and safely.
Another argument for legalizing recreational cannabis is rectifying a broken criminal justice system, which has taken a particularly heavy toll on poor and minority communities. How would this be accomplished? We spoke about this offline. Would people who are currently behind bars be let out? Would records be expunged? Would there be some kind of reparation for people whose educational and employment opportunities have been limited due to convictions in their records?
Well, we certainly are, as a kind of a cornerstone of this, is to take a look at those that have possession charges, and we'll have to decide at what level do we go. Some people really want to go all the way up to, say, the gross misdemeanor felony level. Some want to just be kind of a simple misdemeanor. But what we do know is that that being on their record has stopped them from being able to take advantage of educational opportunities, economic or employment opportunities, and we think there's a great opportunity for those records to go away. Then in addition to that, we'd like to be able to create and carve out an economic development fund that allows potential people who want to get in the business, especially those in communities that have been impacted by the war on drugs, that's been impacted by their communities having so many people going in the criminal justice system, that they get an opportunity to take advantage of the economics of cannabis.
And how would that work? I read in MinnPost that Corey Day, who is a former DFL operative, formed a political action committee along these lines that would, in terms of the economics of legalization, taxation, revenue, entrepreneurship. How could the legislature write a bill that would direct the benefits of that to those communities that have had those adverse effects of this being illegal for so long?
So, for instance, I just came from a convention or a conference in New York, and so the state of Massachusetts has done some work on this. And part of what they've done is taken a look at neighborhoods and communities and people who have been disaffected by that, and that they have carved out a fund that allows those communities to be able to come in and take advantage of, for instance, capital or other kind of, getting at the top of the regulatory structure to be able to develop that. A lot of that is going to have to be in the legislation. We're going to have to do some studying, obviously, of the economic impact. And then there's also going to be what we would hope is some local control that also kind of helps us understand what communities would like for that to happen. We believe that those communities would benefit from it. And that creates an environment in where just large multinational corporations don't come in and dominate the marketplace, that we can actually have this as a more cooperative model, or a model that people that have been disproportionately affected by that, unfortunately, a lot that looks like me, gets an opportunity to legally be able to sell cannabis.
Because marijuana has been classified as a Schedule I substance, there's been limited research on its effects. I believe that is beginning to change. Some research suggests adverse cognitive effects for adolescents who use the drug, who might be able to get access to it more easily if it becomes legal. Also, the National Institute for Drug Abuse says that 30% of people who use cannabis will form some kind of addiction or dependence to it. Like alcohol and tobacco, these things pose health risks. Does it make sense to have another potentially addictive substance become legal?
Well, I guess we could look at it a couple of ways. I'm really concerned about that. I want a portion of revenue that, if this becomes law, to make sure that it goes into not only the research but also prevention and the chemical health side. I think that that's really important for those that may be impacted that way. But I also know that the illicit side, that often people who are addicted or have substance use disorder find a way in which to be able to get the products that they want. At least in this instance, if they were able to buy it, they can know that there won't be the kind of additives that create the issue. It won't be laced with something like fentanyl, which really takes you out pretty quickly, or has some illicit oil that coats your lungs that you can't breathe. That at least you know that the product has gone through a regulatory process. And and I want to back up to say, we aren't suggesting that there isn't harm with a product like this. We're just saying that the harm that's happening now through becoming addicted or through the criminal justice system is greater than if we think that we get this into a marketplace and we regulate it. So yes, we'll admit that there'll be some harm. We're trying to weigh the risk on the issue, and we believe having a product that is safe to consume, at least from a healthcare perspective, and then if you do develop a dependency to it, we're helping to backfill that system to be able to help you, much like we do with alcohol, nicotine, and other issues.
One final question. Is it wise to move forward before law enforcement has a reliable way to test for impairment?
Well, I think that that's a two-part question, right? There's like the medical side of that and the research side, to continue to find ways to test for impairment, to figure out the difference in people's body composition. Law enforcement will have the ability to decide if a person is impaired if, say, they're driving. There are other ways to do that other than just simply a blood test or a breathalyzer. They'll have that ability, and they have that in other states. So yes, we want to listen to law enforcement. Our tour really is not only this idea to go full blown, but it really is to listen to everybody in Minnesota and to get an understanding, everybody from the agricultural community, law enforcement, and people in the urban core who have a lot of views on this issue, and also those who really don't like this, and we want to hear from them. So we want to hear from it, but law enforcement is just one part in one constituency group that we have that we need to be able to listen to. And so if they make a compelling argument that we need to do something differently, I think my ears, of course, my caucus, Representative Winkler, and frankly the whole legislature, this though is being driven by our caucuses, we really want to hear from the whole legislature. It's going to take all of us to get this over the finish line. I know the governor has a separate kind of process that he's working through so that he better understands the issues, but we want to listen to him.
Senator Jeff Hayden, I hope to hear more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.